colleagues, are there any apologies, Nandipa?
Thank you, Chair. The only apology is from Mr. Ryder, who will join the committee later as he's still in transit, Chair.
Yes, I received that apology. Thank you very much. Let me just check the SecDef. Maybe let's just indicate if there are any apologies on your side, and then introduce the delegation from the department side.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. But we also have the IG of the DOD. We have the Surgeon General from SAMS, and then we also have General Nisi, who comes from our legal section, and then we also have General Lidwaba. And then we will be joined by CAF on the issue that has to do with Waterkloof Airforce Base, Chairperson. So that is the team that we've brought to the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, SecDef, and welcome to let me welcome the delegation to the meeting. And no, thanks. All right. I think our numbers have improved. I'm sure we can start the meeting now. All right, colleagues, the meeting is declared open. We can then deal with the item. As I said, it's a briefing on one military hospital. It's not the first time we are discussing the issue. It arose sharply during our visit. It was on the 28th or 29th of November to the 1st of December. It's our visit to the military bases. And so that included a visit to one military hospital in Taba, Zwane. So we were taken through a presentation, and we commended what the department did at the time within the shortest period of time. They were able to redo the 7th floor. It's now a state of the art. Within a matter of weeks, using the COVID funds or COVID allocation. So, but we also received the story of the ramp project that was started way back. The construction started, I think, in 2006, and with close to with R500 million at the time spent. That's information we received. But the project remained incomplete, and the view of the colleagues was that maybe we need to ask the Auditor General to conduct a forensic audit into the project. But it then later transpired that the Chief of the Defense Force had already initiated an inquiry, an investigation into the project. And so we then concluded that it would be a waste of resources to run a parallel process when there is already an initiative that will deliver the same outcome. So the report, the chief received the report in December 2020. And in our meeting last year, we requested the SecDef to share the report with her counterpart in the Department of Public Works, and that we would need them to brief us, both departments, to brief us on consequence management. We subsequently received a briefing from the Minister of Public Works, who indicated that she had already instructed her officials to implement the findings of the forensic investigation. The Department of Defense, the SecDef was not available at the time, and we agreed that the SecDef and the minister were not available at the time, and we agreed that we will postpone receiving their part until such time when we are able to have the minister in particular present in the meeting. Today, we mutually agreed, in fact, not even mutually agreed, the committee decided that on its first meeting, this committee, the Joint Standing Committee on Defense, will feature, will reinstate the item. Today, it's our first meeting, and the item is featuring prominently on the agenda. Let me welcome my co-chair in the meeting. I've not seen his name, but I think he has arrived. With his permission, let me then invite the minister to give us her remarks, and then invite whoever she delegates the responsibility to do a presentation to give us the presentation. Over to Honorable Minister.
Good afternoon, Chair. Good afternoon, honorable members and the delegation from DOD. Chair, I must make a preliminary warning that where I am, it looks like rain with lightning. So if I get cut off, please don't be surprised. Chair, we do acknowledge that that meeting in December, we were not available. We have, I think I tried to call and apologize for that, even though it was after the fact. But we would like to say that today we can say that we will lead the discussion on this matter. We will try and say to you that we are not happy with what we found. We acknowledge that it is something that took place a long time ago. We also acknowledge that, in fact, we, as a department, we should have been on our feet, and this matter should not have dragged on for this many years. For that, we want to apologize even before we get into discussions. At the end of the briefing, we will also say to you what we think we want to see happening in all the arms of services, in all the areas where money is being expended on behalf of the people. So without much ado, I think that, Chair, if you agree, I can then hand over to the DevSec to introduce this report to the committee. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Minister. Over to you, SecDef.
Thank you very much, co-chairs, and then thank you very much, Minister, Deputy Minister, and the honorable members. I think, Chairperson, you've covered quite well the sequence of the events. Today, we are here with a team that is accompanying the Minister on this matter, which are the people that are also having some relevance to the matter that we are going to discuss. Chair, let me say that at the last time when we appeared before the committee on the same,
Yes.
we
this being the first meeting, I've not seen you. If you could put your video on. And I also request all other members, unless they have a difficulty like the one that the minister spoke about, a threat of your network being interrupted. If you have that problem, I would excuse you. But if you don't, please, if you could just set your video on, I would appreciate it.
I've put on my video, Chair, but I also am in a similar situation with the minister. Is drizzling outside, so it keeps on going on and off. But I'll leave it for a bit, at least for the people to see their face, and then I'll put it off. But Chairperson, thank you very much. Just to say that as a follow-up to some of the previous meetings that had taken place on the same matter, that we shared our report with the DG, with the Department of Public Works and Infrastructure. The report was shared. The report which was shared was both the full report, which is 232 pages, as well as the executive summary, which is 42 pages. We did not redact the report that we shared with the Department of with DPWI, and the reasons being that in the report there was reference that was made to both officials from the two departments, which is the DPWI as well as DOD, but also there are companies that had been contracted by DPWI which also appear there. And then there was one company that DPW at some stage ceded it over to the Department of Defense. So that's why we thought that it would be prudent that when we share the report with them, we actually don't redact, because then, just like us, they will be expected that they implement the recommendations that come with the report. We then also shared the report with yourselves, and after protracted discussion, we agreed that we have to share it in a redacted form, and that is the report you have. But the one that you have, it was the executive summary of the 42 pages. Since then, Chairperson, and knowing that we're going to appear before the Joint Standing Committee on Defense today, I have also had the discussion with my colleagues, and then we also had the discussion within the department to say, are we going to now have the presentation which is going to show the names of those implicated, including the companies, and whether we are going to have the presentation made without those names and companies being shown. After deliberation within the DOD context, we agreed that those that are mentioned in the report, they would have been informed by the investigation. They participated in the investigation. they presented themselves in the investigation, and therefore we thought that it made sense that we proceed with the names being shown. That was the position of the department. I then had the similar conversation with my counterpart from DPWI, and then along the same lines that we had within the Department of Defense. And then what the DG also agreed to was that the issue of corruption and fraud needs to be confronted head on, and he was also in support of the decision we have taken as a department to actually show the names. So what we also did, at least a chairperson from the DOD side, those members that are reflected in the report were contacted. We were unable to contact one of them despite having 4 contact details of that member. And then though the rest of them were contacted, they are aware, they were made aware of the decision and what was going to happen, but also subsequent to that, we also wrote them the letters to that effect. Then lastly, Chairperson, let me say that, as you put in the beginning, the former chief of the SANDF initiated this investigation. And what we are going to receive today is the outcome of that investigation. We thought that in order for subjectivity not to feature in the report, it is better that the company that has done its investigation be the one that does the presentation. So today we are joined by Abacus, a forensic crime entity. They are the ones that are going to present the report as the ones that did the investigation, and they are able to better talk to the discussions that they had and what documents they've been privy to. So on that note, Chairperson, I see the colleagues from Abacus have joined in, and if you allow us, Chair, I would then invite them to take the portfolio committee through the presentation.
Okay, no, thank you very much, Chair. Please introduce them, Secretary.
Well, we have Miss let me just see, Miss Gabrielle, that is in the team, but they are also led by Herman Dibier, who is the one who's going to do the presentation. They are a team of 4 people, and those are the people that have been directly involved with this investigation. So I hand over to Mr. Herman Dibier, Chairperson, to lead us in the presentation.
Thank you very much. Mr. Dibier, over to you.
Good evening, Chair. It's Gabriella Zalarov. I can see that Herman's line is muted. I'm trying to alert his attention to the fact that he's muted.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
Mr. Dibier, would you fly to your presentation? Chairperson, I could see the view of Mr. Herman Dibier. I don't know whether they are also experiencing the same problem that we have here on RAI. Mr. Tip.
They seem to be experiencing some connectivity challenges.
It seems like Mr. De Beer is unmuted, but we still cannot hear him.
Let me just...
Hello, I'm talking
I'm
now.
not so sorry. Oh, yes, we can hear.
Yes, I'm coming through Nicole's microphone now. Can the meeting hear me?
Yes,
Yes.
we can.
Yes.
I'm sorry for that delay. May I just say again, my name is Herman De Beer. I'm the managing partner of Abacus, and the two people with me on this call, Nicole and Gabrielle. Nicole was the project manager of this assignment, and Gabrielle, the senior person leading with some of the aspects. They will assist me in the presentation. Nicole is trying to flight the presentation, and she has a challenge in that.
Yes, Chair. I tried to share my screen, but it says that the host disabled participant screen sharing. So I'm unable to share the presentation.
I have made you a co-host now, so you can flight. Thank you.
Thank you.
While she's trying to find the presentation, I'd like not to waste too much time, but to say evening to the chairs, the minister, the deputy minister. I particularly would like to say evening to the Inspector General of the Defence Force, General Bohali, who was the mandator of our firm when we performed this investigation. As SecDev indicated, this is not a redacted version, but it is a shortened presentation of our report and our executive summary that we completed, the work we completed towards the end of September 2020, and our final report handed to the Defence Force end of December 20. This presentation focused then on the investigation that we performed at the one military hospital. We will briefly talk under those headings, the high-level background, which we believe give context and is important, the mandate objectives, in other words, what is it that we were asked to do, our factual findings or conclusions, and our recommendations that we dealt with. So this presentation was primarily prepared for purposes of talking to this standing committee at the request of SecDev and the Inspector General. Just briefly to say, we're focusing very heavily on the so-called repair and maintenance program, which will become known as the RAMP project that we will talk extensively about. Subsequent to our initial appointment, we were also asked to talk about what became the refurbishment project that ran towards the end since 2012 at one military hospital. So the background in brief, One Mill, the hospital was initially constructed between those dates, and it was fundamentally there to improve medical service to the SANDF members, president, deputy president, national and international dignitaries. An important point was the fact that Public Works carried the responsibility for the maintenance on One Mill. We then determined that Public Works became inundated with maintenance and maintenance of state facilities during the latter part of the 90s. In 99, that's relevant to our assignment, Public Works launched a project which they called the Repair and Maintenance Program. It was a slightly broader concept than the normal maintenance. The repair aspect was added, and initially they launched the RAMP initiative across the prisons and the court environment, where it was fairly successful. The focus of our mandates, in agreement with the Office of the Inspector General, was in fact the following one issue: why is One Mill dysfunctional or non-functional as we found it? The specific mandates objectives looked at the procurement processes followed, any unsound relationships, the extent to which the programs, plans, and objectives regarding RAMP were adhered to, the reason for the delay in the progress of One Mill, the root cause and the mitigation if any, the procurement of particular medical equipment related to the One More ramp project. And then I make the short note indicating that it became important to include what is later called the Refurbishment Project in our investigation. It was agreed to that extent to include it without any additional cost to the Defence Force. And we performed this investigation during October through to December 2020. And we were really delayed by the onset of COVID right in the middle of that. In our presentation, we break it down into three phases or three big projects that almost stand by themselves. And we will present our findings under the ramp issue. The ramp ran, although we say 2006 to 9 is the date that the actual construction took place, but the assessment or the commencement goes back to 2001, led by Public Works. Initial estimate, cost, budgets, and contract value was about 32 million. Then came a phase which we call ramp expansion. We will explain that. Again, done between 2010 and 11, led by Public Works again, the same type of contractors with one or two changes that we will talk to. And the initial estimate for that phase was 156. Eventually, it cost 431. Why were we asked to do this work? It was the case that certain floors were unfinished and locked up after the spending of the 431 million towards March or in March 2011. Since 2012, the refurbishment project commenced, and the initial phase, 2012 to 14, led by Public Works, then taken over by DoD in 14 to date of our report. And that part of our investigation focus in main, why has it taken so long to get to the point where the contractors that have to do the actual refurbishment was not appointed when we got appointed to on our assignment in 2019. So first part of our presentation will look into the ramp, and I'm going to use the term classic ramp because that is what was in place in the period or in play between 2002 and 2000 and 2009. This page gives us a bit of a timeline. It also gives us the introduction to the companies and players in this assignment. And broadly speaking, you will see between December, in December 2000, SSI, an engineering company, was appointed as the principal engineers of the ramp project led by DPW, Public Works. In January, they appointed Multipro as the ramp project manager company. And then flowing from that, a status quo assessment was performed by SSI. And a report to this effect issued in April 2001 that included the actual cost estimate and scope of work that had to be performed. The whole project then went quiet. We call it the hiatus for 4 years. The cost estimates was redone for electrical and mechanical and for structural and wet services, but a full status quo report was not again performed ever. And we'll talk again about that aspect because it became a pertinent issue in the findings that is an issue on this project. You would see that the tender for ramp was issued by Public Works in July 06. In October 06, 2 contractors, Fast Move and Superway, was appointed to do the work, and that contract was to run through to October 2009. That's just the timeline and the introduction of the companies. In the next page, just a visual presentation of how this whole set of contractors fitted together. The custodian of ramp was Public Works and the overseer and responsible department. They appointed 2 consultants to help them, Multipro, which is the project managers, SSI, the consulting or the engineering consultants. And at the bottom, you see the 2 contractors, Superway doing the building and structure work, Fast Move the mechanical and electrical work. And on the right, we make the comment the end user, the Department of Defense, which played actually no role in any of the decision making as to who will be appointed for what. The process in Public Works almost ran by itself with very limited input from the Department of Defense. And Public Works were completely involved and responsible for oversight and management. Before I page over, I just want to say two things about RAMP. It means nothing else than repair and maintaining what is there. No replacement, no refurbishment, is just make a facility look good and like it started off. That concept is quite important, and an appreciation of what RAMP was in the head of the Public Works Department, and the difference of opinion in DoD, which I will explain later, became one of the real reasons why this project had particular challenges. I want to just give a little bit of background how RAMP came to 1 mil. As said, initial RAMP projects in other departments, prisons, justice in particular, was very successful, and Public Works decided to expand this to other departments, including defense. We determined in 2001 significant engagement between Public Works and defense led to an agreement to implement RAMP at 1 mil. We told you that the initial status quo assessments was conducted and concluded in 2001. The hiatus then happened, the standstill. We found that in 2004, the 1 mil was served with so-called probation notices for non-compliance with certain Occupational Health and Safety Act aspects, both by Tshwane Fire Department and the Department of Labor. That particular incident caused life to get back into the decision to proceed with RAMP, together with certain budget constraints. Therefore, the Public Works appointment of the actual contractors were only done much later, and it commenced in 2006, as we indicated. On the right-hand side, we make a little comment. SSI did not again do an extensive status quo assessment. One of the findings we make later is that lack of a new status quo assessment before the work started in 2006 led to a significant difference into what was expected as per the tender, quotes, and eventual contracts. They found a completely different environment at 1 mil due to the deterioration of the facility since 2001, when the in-depth status quo was done. On the next page, you will see the names of the various companies, the contractors, Superway and Fast Move. Around the appointment of Fast Move, we found that the principal engineers who were mandated by Public Works to assist them raised significant concerns about Fast Move as a contractor on this project. They believed Fast Move had insufficient experience. They questioned the ability to carry out a project of this size and nature, and they expressed an uncertainty about the health and safety compliance aspects within the Fast Move contractor. SSI felt so strong about it that they recommended that this particular bid be lapsed, the validity allowed to lapse, and that a new tender be reissued. We found no rational reason for that, but Public Works rejected that recommendation and appointed Fast Move, who then continued to perform the work at 1 military. We now come to some of the pertinent findings that contributed to the situation that 1 mil is in later on. We've made the point already that the old infrastructure actually required extensive repairs. Not sure at that stage whether the RAMP type approach was suitable. We then make a finding which is very pertinent, and that is what Public Works believed they were going to do at 1 mil, and what the Defence Force, particularly those people, the professionals and the doctors working at 1 mil, thought that was going to happen to the facility, completely different. The doctors thought, probably correct so, that by the time the ramp is complete, a modern and fully functional hospital will be delivered to them with all the issues addressed. This led to constant scope changes, which is the point I make in the fourth bullet, but I skipped the third one. One of the decisions taken in the way the ramp was executed at 1 mil was the decision that the one military hospital had to stay fully functional during that whole 3-year period while the ramp was being executed. This is a deviation from the normal execution plan that all ramps were done previously. All these things together took us to the point where we make the finding there was a significant lack of coordination by public works that resulted in time delays, additional funding requirements, late appointment of other service providers, rework required due to damages caused by late appointment of other service providers, on-site theft of product and facility stuff, and damages done to the work done. We find that public work failed in its oversight responsibility to ensure a complete status quo was performed in time or timeously for the appointment of the eventual contractors. The complexity of execution of ramp on 1 mil was in fact a failure by public works and DoD to appropriately plan and execute for ramp in 1 mil and to determine whether it's in fact a suitable approach. There was a significant failure in our view by public works to appoint a single principal agent to manage ramp at 1 mil. This point needs to be understood in the context of other contractors, those that you have not seen on my slide, also performing work at one military hospital, and they were reporting to other principal agents and other people in public works. This caused the finding that we make that the oversight failure by public works to effectively coordinating the on-site execution was a significant contribution factor. The last point on this slide is the significant variation orders that we found to accommodate scope changes. These scope changes I have indicated came because of the professionals, the doctors at 1 mil demanding certain work to be done, which was never planned, scoped, attended on, or contracted with the particular contractors and or project managers. We believe this to be an oversight and failure by DoD. We will get to more broad recommendations, but we believe that our report, which was already done so as explained by SecDev, that this report be shared with the Director General of Public Works for their consideration of those aspects that we mentioned there. I need to make 2 caveats here. If we did this assignment earlier and not 11 years after the execution of this work, there was likely to be significant findings around the payment of work not being performed, work outside of scope, work priced outside of scope and agreement, but the documentation 11 years later that we found mainly at Public Works was not of such a nature that we could make firm findings around those aspects, who was responsible for it, but it clearly led to a position where it was almost impossible for us to determine the overrun on costs. Was it part of ramp classic or ramp expansion? Last point I wanted to make is there were very few of the people actually still available for consultation that worked on the ramp classic project, particularly the planning phase running up to 2006. Thank you. That is what I wanted to say about ramp classic. I'm now going to talk about what we call ramp expansion, and in retrospect, this is possibly the part of the project where we found the most significant challenges, contributions to the status of what was eventually the 1 mil hospital condition. We call this phase the expansion phase. It ran before 2010 and 11, and the big impetus for this expansion or extension was the fact that there was a need for 1 mil to be in a specific condition when for the World Cup soccer that was planned towards the latter part of 2010. This is the timeline of the ramp expansion. The previous contracts came to an end in November 2009. First action that we determined was on 8 December, Superway and Fast Move, both the contractors, received a 12-month extension to November 2010. We then make a point, which I'll talk to later again. Although these were extended, by the end of December 2009, Public Works, on a national basis, terminated all ramp projects because they believed it was inappropriate, didn't achieve what they planned, was almost an acknowledgement that the ramp projects did not serve the government maintenance environment and requirements well. In March 2020, we'll talk about this company again. Babareki was appointed as a new project manager to replace Multipro, who worked there before. We will make particular findings around Babareki and the irregular appointment in that environment. December to May was the estimated completion of the first and the second floor and the kitchen area. And then December 09 through to December 20, we wrote there in our summary report, redesign and refurbishment of one military. Those two words, those two concepts was now introduced into what was going to happen at one mill. It took the classic ramp and introduced redesign and refurbishment. We will tell you later what they did in practice, but it was never clearly defined what they meant by redesign and refurbish. Each of you can think of what you think it is, and so many views we will have, and that will possibly be one of the main reasons why the ramp expansion turned out to be a real disaster. Then we deal with all these matters that you can see on our timeline, and you will see there on 31 March 2011, all the contractors and the consultants left, and the doors on the first floor was locked. The pharmacy was incomplete. And when we arrived in 2019, those doors were still locked by the same lock and key that was put there at the end of March. The only difference was the work done during ramp expansion were demolished. How did we get to that position is what I like to talk to now. On this slide, I give you the players that contributed to the role players of ramp expansion. There are more people here than the previous time, and I'd like to talk to them because I need to highlight some of them later. On the right-hand side, you have the Department of Defense. The most senior person on that side was a General Fortuin, who was the facilities manager in the DoD, responsible for this area. Below him, you see a person by the name of Colonel de Prier. Colonel de Prier was a qualified laboratory assistant that worked in the Defense Force, but by the time this project took place, she was the facilities manager at one mill specifically. Below her, you see the name Anthony Kritzinger. Anthony Kritzinger is an architectural technologist. We'll talk a little bit more later as to what that means. He was employed by SSI. Both de Prier and Kritzinger eventually played a critical role in what was to become refurbishment and redesign. And I'll explain that again later. On the left-hand side at the bottom, you'll see the two contractors staying in their place. SSI, the principal agent and engineer consultants. And then you see the introduction of Babareki by Public Works, and we'll talk about that point later again. In the middle, I have given in those dotted blocks the list of two sections of officials from Public Works and DoD. On the left, the Public Work people, and on the right, the DoD people. That group of people will become exceptionally important in our findings as to who decided to do the refurbishment and redesign without going out on tender, without documenting it, without formal approval. On the right-hand side, I make the comment in brackets, and of the record meeting. Persons that attended that meeting conveyed to us that in that meeting, these officials from both sides agreed that they will change ramp to a redesign and refurbishment initiative. That particular meeting and the agreement was never documented. It was never formally introduced to anywhere, but everybody from General Fontaine through De Preer, Anthony Kritzinger, and all the people on this slide knew that we were now doing refurbishment and redesign and not repair and maintenance anymore. You will see later what that means. So I want to go slightly further and give you more aspects around the introduction of the ramp. In December, the ramp expansion project was approved by Public Works for 1 mil. By the end of December, they terminated ramp across the government environment for all repair and maintenance environments because it was not suitable. I tell you that critical areas had to be completed for the World Cup, and that was the reason for the focus on floors 1 and 2 that was prioritized then to be completed by May 2010 in the planning phase. I remake the point that redesign and refurbishment was now introduced, which is significantly different, and it was then agreed in that common understanding flowing from the informal meeting that I have shared with you. However, at the end, it remained locked. So what are our main findings? I think the first point, very important. All the contractors, the principal agent, all those people, their contracts stayed exactly the same. In other words, they were asked to do redesign and refurbishment, but they were working under a repair and maintenance contract that was just purely extended in time and additional value. Multipro were exited. We could find no good reason for that. Babareki was introduced and appointed by Public Works through what is called a negotiated process, which is provided for in the Public Works acquisition and disposal management documentation. They could do that. However, a negotiated process requires certain specific aspects. You can deviate from the normal procurement processes where you ask for tenders. You may solicit a bid from a single service provider, but only if there's an emergency or urgency. None of that existed here. We found the reason for multi-pro, or we could find no reason for the introduction of multi-pro. Neither did we see any reason for the introduction of Babareki, and specifically we found no reason to determine this to be an emergency appointment. We go further regarding Babareki, and we find that their quote and their contract was for 4 million, but eventually over this period they got paid 14 million. What is interesting is that Multipro did that same work for about 7 to 8 years before they came, and the total fee for Multipro was 7 million. These guys built 14 million in just over a year. We therefore found that their appointment did not meet the requirements of a negotiated process. It's therefore an irregular appointment. We further conclude that the 14 million was irregular expenditure. Last comment that I make is when we try to engage with Babareki to help us understand their invoicing and payments, they refuse to engage with us. I then continue to talk about the decision to depart from the ramp project that was made in that informal off-the-record meeting. We make the point that none of that decisions and the agreement in that off-the-record meeting was ever converted into contractual arrangement or any other documentation. In the contracts, the bill of quantities, the budgets were described to us by people that participated in as guesstimates, purely done to obtain approval and a budget number. And they informed us that these things, the guesstimate plus the lack of proper documentation and contractual arrangements, made it absolutely impossible to hold the contractors accountable. We then record briefly the budgeted amounts. These are the guesstimates that they came up with, a 156 in total. And I want to go to two particular important aspects regarding the expansion project. The first floor, for those of you that do not know, is the highly technical area of the hospital. It's the theater area where the x-rays are, the scanning devices, the laboratories where they do the testing. Very, very complex environment. Because of the way ramp expansion was going to do, there was decided to do a redesign and refurbishment of that particular floor. When we did our investigation, we found that Colonel de Prier and Kritzinger were the two people that did that. They explained to us the following. They would consult with doctors to get their ideas. Kritzinger, who's a draftsman, if I ask Kritzinger, what do you do? He said to me, as an architectural technologist, I'm the person that after the engineers and the architects have made the basic design, I'm the person that do the detailed drafting. That's my expertise. The Prier, facility manager at One Mill, in a previous life worked as a laboratory assistant. The two of them did the redesign. Because of the two of them doing the redesign, there were significant design flaws. So much so that I can only record 3 here. The passages that was built leading to the theatre complex was too narrow to allow the normal hospital beds to go through. More important, later on you will see about equipment that was purchased. It could not fit through the doors, was never installed, and we'll talk about that. What was the eventual product was of such a state that the professionals and doctors at One Mill refused to occupy and work in that area which they refurbished and redesigned. And that was the reason why that place was locked up and still in that position 10 years later. And now I want to talk about the medical equipment. Approximately 20 million rands of medical equipment, scans, x-rays, mammograms, other highly qualified, expensive product were purchased through a procurement process. But there was no involvement with anybody from the ramp expansion project, neither the contractors, nor the principal agent, or anyone else. This resulted in the new medical equipment that was purchased not fitting in through the door, and they couldn't bring them onto site. There was also other technical challenges like weight and issues like that. For that reason, the medical equipment stayed in storage. We found some of them still in storage, and they became obsolete without being ever used. The procurement, in our view, need to be regarded as fruitless and wasteful, and we concluded that particular officials that were part of that procurement must be held accountable for the fruitless and wasteful expenditure that flowed from that. We then make the finding that on the 31st, the doors to the first floor were locked, and was still the case when we arrived there in 2019. After the non-operation of the first floor, an additional funding of 40 million was requested by way of an extension. The funding, we understand, was approved. However, Public Works refused a further extension at the request of DOD due to the constraints they believe the Auditor General would have found about a further extension. We therefore find that the overall ramp expansion project was a manufactured and a manipulated procurement process purely to get the contractors that happened to be around to continue to do work on redesign and refurbishment done by inexperienced and unqualified people. Our recommendations include that certain senior executive officials who participated in the manipulation of the ramp expansion project, and we listed them, be held accountable for that irregular conduct. We further recommend that all the expenditure, the 156 million spent on the ramp expansion, be regarded as irregular. We also recommended that the expenditure relating to the ramp be classified as fruitless and wasteful expenditure. On the next slide is a pure summary. I'm not going to talk you through the detail, except to say to you, they intended to spend a certain amount of money that was overrun by a significant amount, and at the bottom you can see some of their percentages of overrun for various and multiple reasons, and a lot of them unable to account for the work done in that period. I do not want to spend too much of the time of this presentation. I try to do it in 40 minutes, so I'm going to try and do the following part in a bit of a summary format. After all of this, and I'll page over, in August 2020, 2012, it was decided to initiate a new project. It was initiated, we indicate on the summary slide, by Public Works, and later on that project was transferred to DOD. The cost estimate for the refurbishment required to bring one mill to the level that people thought it would be was about 1.4 billion. Due to the lack of the facilities on the first floor and other places, I did hear reference to floor 7, but also the floor where the pharmacy is and the entrance area, certain outsourced work needs to take place in one mill where patients have to be moved to private facilities, and the cost incurred for that we estimate to be over 1 billion. You'll see the more detailed number later on in the presentation. I want to make only 4 big statements around the refurbishment project, and I can possibly make them all with reference to the timeline. It took Public Works from 2012 to 2014 to actually get people appointed to do the refurbishment project. But what is important, those people were supposed to make the plan, not the building. It consisted of Tektura, an architectural company, and others who had to design what it is that we want to do with one mill.
I think I lost you. Was that my only experience? Sorry, were I the only person who experienced that problem?
Yeah, Chair, I guess we were following all along. Maybe it's your connection.
Yeah. We had no problem.
Sure, you may continue.
All right. Let me go to the next slide. So can you hear me now, Show? Are you good?
Yes, I'm following.
100%. I want to make the following. The next slide is a nice summary. You will see on the left, Public Works appointed Tektura and all these other entities to help them design what needs to take place. Not do it, but needs to take place at one mill. It took them 2 years to put those people in place. Takes us to 2014. By 2014, during 2014, through ministerial intervention, it was decided to move this project from Public Works to Defence, which happened in 2015. Some of it only finalized in 2016. From then onwards, the logistics division became the custodian, Works Formation, which was a newly formed division within the Defence Force, a Public Works inside the Defence Force, if I may call it that, and don't want to offend people that work there, with SAMS the end user, and then the whole environment around Tektura was turned slightly different. Tektura became the principal agent and all the other people had to work for them. That's how the project started running, let's call it 15, 16. I'm not going to talk through slides 32 to 33. I want to slowly start. I want to go to the findings, which is on page 34. And this is a focus that we had on this particular project. We did not look at it in significant detail. We just wanted to determine for the Inspector General's office, why was this significant delay and no progress? So these are the pertinent findings. We find that the procurement environment within the Defence Force is not familiar with the regulatory prescripts and technical requirements involved for infrastructure procurement. Significant amount of presentations were made to that procurement environment to progress. By the time we finalized our report, what Tektura and the other contractors determined should happen at one mill has not been converted into a procurement document, was not in the status that it can be issued, and will possibly take another year to do if dedication is given. This resulted in significant delays in finalizing the relevant procurement documentation. We then also make an appointment about Works Formation, which I indicated was now responsible for operating this kind of project. They were a newly established capability within the Defence Force, but they did not have the professionals, such as mechanical, electrical, electronic, structural, and civil engineers at their disposal to appropriately assist them with a project of this nature and the specialization required. If I go over to the next slide, I give a summary of what that project, what Tektura and the other consultants say that it will cost us now to fix that hospital. And you will see how it moved from 900,000 to 1.4, which was the guesstimate in June 2011. No, I'm wrong. This is not a guesstimate. This is a real estimate appropriately calculated by Tektura and those people. The next slide in brief are the costs for the outsourcing of certain of the capabilities that we needed to have on the first floor by the DoD, where they had to outsource to other hospitals to perform that kind of work for them and medical experience. I want to make two more points, which is fairly important. I have dealt with the significant delays between the initiation of the project and the eventual transferring of that project to the DoD. I did make mention of the lack of expertise, initially in public works, but later on also in works formation. The particular procurement delays with DoD as a result of the health technologies aspect. I want to hold there. It became clear to us that the health technologies capability is absolutely vital when you work in an environment like One Mill. These are the type of people that can combine what was needed structurally for what is technically needed within a hospital so that doctors can do their work appropriately. Only by 2016 was there a realization that we need these people as part of the team. Not the Defense Force, not Public Works, not Tektura, no one that was part of that world actually realized that only in 2016. And the documents to procure the services of health technologists was only issued in 2018 when they were appointed. That is 6 years after this project started. And it was those people that should have been part of the project planning right in the beginning. I want to go over to the next page. Again, there's significant delays on two other aspects, and that's the CIDB requirements. That's the construction industry body that ensure that people are appropriately registered and certified to do certain work. The introduction of that into the procurement processes in DoD took a significant amount of time and was probably still not done by the time we wrote our report. One of the aspects that was frequently shared with us by each and every senior official and officer that we engaged continuously indicated to us a lack of a clear direction and what they call a master plan for One Mill. We were still unable to determine whether there was such a master plan, although we noted that Tektura, right in the beginning, was mandated to do one of those. But they never got to the position where that was actually done as part of the assignment. We were asked to look at certain unsound relationships, and we made a determination on such a relationship between a General Fortuin, who's not in the force anymore, and Tektura, the principal agent. This was an inquiry initially done in 2016, but was abandoned. And by 2021, when we finalized our report, this matter was, we provided the Hawks with a new evidential material relating to this unsound relationship, which in essence is the payment of monies to that general via contractor. In recommendation, we recommended that the current role and responsibility of the works formation be reconsidered, particularly if they should be involved in One Mill. We asked whether alternative and workable solutions be put in place to address the lack of required expertise and capability to ensure that the refurbishment project can proceed. We recommended that the current procurement processes be aligned to be able to do this construction procurement, and the capability is more efficient within the department. We recommended appropriate structure within DoD to have a clear master plan to design and agreed upon by the appropriate structures. We also recommend a clear line of responsibility to be established within the DoD related to the Refurbishment Project. And lastly, we recommended that the unsound relationship that we identified involving Fortuin and Tectura be considered and progressed with the relevant officials, Hawks and the SA Police. Those are the pertinent findings and conclusions, and I tried to do this in 14 minutes, otherwise I could have occupied you for a long time. I was virtually talking about a project that stretched almost 20 years. I appreciate your time. Thank you, SecDef.
Thank you very much, Mr. De Beer. SecDef, concluding remarks.
Chair, I think that I don't know, there probably would be some questions for the members. Otherwise, I think from the department, as I mentioned, that the officials that have been shown in the presentation from the DoD side, they have been contacted, they've been spoken to, and then they've been written letters to that effect. And then the other work that is done on them is the work that is looked at by our IG, and probably in the discussion that will come out. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, SecDef. Colleagues, SecDef mentioned at the beginning that the report you received about a week ago was redacted, but following consultations and further consultations, they resolved that the report be released with all the names. Of course, that was after the implicated people, those that they could reach out to, were alerted to the fact that this report would be released to the public. In other words, we tabled at the portfolio committee meeting or the joint standing committee meeting on defense, and it is an open meeting. So I think I needed just to clear that, one. And two, I also need to clear that I received the report way back. I think it was in December, time or November, but I then had not I did not have the instructions to release it because they were still going to undergo the consultations and that they thought were necessary before we make the report public. So I kept the report confidential until just about a week ago, when there was an agreement that I can now release it. So I don't want people to say the department was had been withholding the report from the committee. No, it was released, but they needed to do these things so that just to clear the air before it goes to public or to the public. All right, let me just check who's. All right, welcome, Mr. One of the colleagues who said will join us late has joined the meeting. All right, so I don't see the hands.
Mine, Chair.
Oh, is it yours? I don't know what's the problem with my document. Right, yours.
Maybe they can remove the presentation, Chairperson, then probably you'll see.
Oh, I see. Yes. No. You are right. Okay. So I have two hands already. I'll comment the end. Mr. Marais, you are first, and then Mr. Muth after you. Thabo Muth after you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, this is another shocker. It seems like 2021 is a year of shocks from the one to the other, and from bad to worse. Obviously, we are glad that we have received this forensic report now, and that it's open, and that we can see, what has happened. You will recall when we went there in the first time in this term, I told you that in 2016 or 15, when I first went there, and nothing has changed. So, and even in 2016, I recall that there was scans and machines and high-tech machines standing there in crates. And this is probably some of those equipment that was reported that was in no use anymore. I would expect the SecDef to tell us what now, because clearly there's enormous lot of findings and recommendations. And obviously, I recall when the DPWI made their presentation, Minister De Lille indicated, you know, that disciplinary processes have started, internal investigations, and to hold certain people accountable and responsible. It seems like that has not commenced in the Department of Defense, which is questionable, and I need to know where we are in that process. Because clearly, even when you look at Colonel de Prier and Mr. Kritzinger, their involvement, surely they must have been authorized by someone. I mean, this is not work that has happened somewhere in the back corners and somewhere far away from everybody that can see what is happening. This was one military hospital. This was the first floor. This is where the theaters and the pharmacy and everything like that is. And I mean, everybody sees that every single day. So somebody must have noticed that, hey, something is wrong, something is going on, and we need to intervene as the seniors. So obviously we need to know and get from DOD, where does this leave us? What have they done in the meantime? Is LOC responsible? Is Works Formation responsible? Who has given the relative instructions? Is it the Surgeon General or the ex-Surgeon General that must take responsibility? So somewhere along we need to know that. I've picked up in the report on slide 11, where they say that in 2004, one mill was served with a probation notice for non-compliance with Occupational Health and Safety Act. Nothing further was said about compliance in that regard. So I was wondering, so where do we stand now in terms of compliance with Occupational Health and Safety Act? Is it still not, non-compliance? And in the meantime, the hospital is in operation. So obviously we need to know about that. And then obviously, for me, it's a matter of huge disappointment, but it's something that we have to deal with. And there's some consequences that must take place and some accountabilities. And then we have to decide, and this is probably what links to what we have discussed yesterday as well at the meeting, and that is, do we have the funding? Will National Treasury allocate us the funding to do all this work that we need to do, seeing that we don't even really know exactly where we stand, because a lot of work must still be done in terms of this report and the recommendations right at the end. So we don't know where we stand and what it will actually cost us and what the eventual budget will be, and whether it will be that 1.4 billion or whether it will be more. So obviously I need to know more than that, and hopefully the SecDef will be able to give us the information as the accounting officer, or whoever she then assigns to give us that information. Obviously, in terms of the Inspector General's work, I suspect that, and I would expect that investigation and disciplinary actions will take place. So obviously, we need to know where we are standing with that. I'm going to hold my current position, Chair, and allow the other members as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Murray. Mr. Muhle.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair, and good evening to members and the delegation from the department. Chair, this report. It's
Chair, my apologies. Just a reminder that the videos must be on. Mr. Motley, if you can put your video on. I think you have asked that. Thank you.
Yes,
I'm in the dark. I'm not sure whether you'll be able to see me. That's the challenge. I'm in the dark. My apology about that.
I can see that.
Yeah.
Okay. Very dark.
Yeah. No. It's fine. Chair, I'm worried about what the report has revealed. One wonders whether how did it come about that the end user was not involved? Who was the initiator of the said project? Because you can't just say, for an example, you want pizza, and when we bring you pizza with certain ingredient, you change along the road. So the end user in this case is supposed to be SAMS, who's responsible for the design, will be responsible for how the design should look like, the equipments that needs to be put in place, have an idea of the outlook of refurbished 1 mil. Therefore, by the time you go to public works to say we have made resources available, that should have been done internally to say, you come DPW as an implementing agent, but we know exactly what is it that we are looking for, what we have in mind. But the manner in which this whole project was conducted, it seems that I'm subject to be corrected that people just avail the resources, not knowing exactly what is it that they are looking for. Because there's no way that you initiate a project and you don't become part of it up until the end, in terms of provision of specs, so forth and so on. All the steps or phases in the project, as the end user, you must be the one giving direction on specification, exactly what you want. You can't. I'm not sure what happened. Maybe we'll get clarity from those that were involved. But clearly, it looks like it was a money-making scheme to me. I'm subject to be corrected because you remove one consulting engineer, you put the other, and you just escalate cost. But there is no progress in terms of the actual work that needs to be done. On the other side, equipments are procured that will not talk to what the structural contractor is doing. So it's totally there's an issue around planning. There's an issue around internal control around this project that I think the department need to address. And obviously, I think steps should be taken to correct what has happened. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mutle. I'm looking at the record. I will right on top. I will start with Mr. Mafanya, Mr. Raider, Mr. Maliake Shalembe, and Ms. Alexander Bugas. Let me just check if Right. So those are that's many. Mr. Mafanya.
Thank you very much. Me too. I cannot avail my face this time because my gadget is quite disappointing. Thank you very much, and for the presentation as well. Chair, we have been quite lenient in sourcing this kind of information, even to an extent where we had to do an oversight to military hospital. And we also highlighted the issue that we would also want to revisit the military hospital because there were quite a number of issues that were not attended to in terms of our questioning at that time. Now that we have this report that actually outlines the kind of criminality that took place, and there is no better way of explaining it that there are people who neglected their responsibilities. And in this regard, there is actually, an investigation has been done actually, and then the information is for everybody to see. By tomorrow morning or any other day, this report will be on the highlights of the newspapers and the media will take it up. And it warrants some sort of proper investigations where organizations like the Hawks get involved. And we as the committee must also write to the minister as an accounting officer as well, the minister as a political head of the department, because you cannot afford to lose an amount close to 1 billion and then nothing happens. And nobody may claim that I wasn't aware, we did the best what we could. And there's a lot of damage that happened, including losing capable professionals in the medical field. So for us to have the gains again in that aspect, we are not going to be able to do that. Even when these things were highlighted as far back as 2015-16, where to say to revamp, you could need 1.4 at that time. And when we went there also, we highlighted those issues that the reality here, we are talking about 2 billion almost for us to bring the hospital to where it should be. So my suggestion and opinion is not about questioning the ZDF and all that. We are aware that it's criminality that took place. Then the minister and the executive must take charge of the situation and open up criminal charges against whoever is found to have had her hand or his hand in the cookie jar. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mafanya. Mr. Ryder.
Thank you, Chairperson. If you have a look at your screen, you'll see my video is on. And I'm behind Bob.
Yes, I can see you are calling from a prison.
It's like a horror story. And unfortunately, as I said to you, I was in transit during the presentation. So I missed comments that went with the delivery of it this evening. And I think Mr. Maria has summed it up well, and Mr. Mafanya has done the same. There need to be serious consequences on that. But Chair, more important than that for me right now is for the welfare of our soldiers, our military personnel. The future of this project. I don't see anything.
I
don't see anything that's in the documentation that we received that spoke about what's going to happen in the future. There obviously are some recommendations, but the future of this project, Chair, is it going to vest with the Department of Defense? Is it going to vest with the Department of Public Works? And how on earth are we going to get ourselves into a position where one military hospital becomes functional again? Because the reality is that the hospital it's limping along on one leg like many of its patients. Chair, there are two components to what we're discussing. The one is looking in the rearview mirror and fixing what went wrong. The other one is looking ahead and dealing with what we need to fix going forward. We need answers on both. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shelembe.
Chair, you can see, in my house that the lights are not good here in the park. So please, can you allow me to switch off the video? No, but you have seen me, Chairperson.
I can confirm it's you.
Thank you. Thank you. Chairperson, you know, I think one must appreciate, the report, is well prepared and comprehensive. But the challenge, Chairperson, I'm not sure, say, if we deal with the issues of consequence management, whether those who are responsible are still in the employment of the department. If they are, I think it's time that the minister must make sure, just to agree with Honorable Mafasi, that the criminal charges must be opened against those, but only if they are, still in employment. I don't know what's going to happen if maybe they are no longer in the employment. And also, what has been raised by, Honorable Mutle, that the project was initiated with the purpose. And I think any project, before it is agreed upon, the department must have, a clear plan as to who will be responsible for those, things to be done in the project. Chairperson, is very disturbing. I think maybe the SEDEF will explain to us whether the complaint that, the DOD procurement section seems to be not familiar with the prescript when it comes to the procurement of services and goods. Because I'm of concern that how did they come to a decision to purchase the medical equipment without seeing that those equipment were going to be fitting at the passage or door in the space where it was expected to be installed. And if maybe they said they can, maybe explain whether the DOD procurement section is now well capacitated, because we cannot afford, if the report says the procurement section seems not to be good, to run the department. So it means now we are risking the taxpayers' money, giving it to the people who do not have the capacity to handle such money. We're speaking of, say, a billion rand, which is now has become like a fruitless expenditure. And we are not going to get back that money, because what has been done and has been paid. I don't think it's going to be easy to recover that money from those who are responsible. Now, the problem, Chairperson, we are here to represent, the people, to make sure that the taxpayers' money is looked after. Anything that goes wrong, Chairperson, I think the minister, is listening, is responsible in the department. So now we are hoping that, the minister will be playing a major role to ensure that those people who are implicated, if they are still there, are charged accordingly and even, put to jail. Chairperson, speaking about something from 2000, we are now in 2022. Now, what are the people saying to us that, from that time, those who are in charge are responsible, elected by the people on the ground to represent them? They can't, protect and prevent corruption in the department. So, Chairperson, in short, I think my feelings is that the minister now must do whatever possible, because I don't think the officials themselves in the department will be able, to say or to do anything now, because some of them, they need to be arrested. So I agree with Honorable Mufasha that the minister must take the responsibility in that case and make sure that those are charged accordingly and arrested. Thank you, Chairperson.
Very much, Ms. Burgess.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I must admit that the report is shocking. I, however, appreciate that we at last received the report, and I also want to plead that there must be consequences and that following up on the implementation of the recommendations must be followed with an eagle's eye. Chair, my first question is, in our way, the procurement procedure followed to appoint a project manager was irregular, and the amount of 14.5 million must be viewed as irregular expenditure. And the report was handed to the Inspector General in December 2020. What has been done since to recover these funds? And then secondly, Chair, the report confirmed a lack of leadership and oversight at the command structure of One Mile Hospital. Are these people still in the SANDF? And has any disciplinary action been taken? Thank you, Chair. I'm done, Chair.
Chair, you muted.
Oh, no, thank you very much, colleagues. Right, colleagues, the report says at the time of drafting this report in September 2020, floor 1 and the pharmacy section on floor 2 remain locked and non-operational. Patients are still being transferred to private care facilities at significant cost. We have heard that this was considered as a jewel of the Defense Force at the time, this 1 mil hospital. It boasts 500 beds. It's a prime facility meant to provide treatment to the president, deputy president, their predecessors, and foreign dignitaries, members of the SANDF, veterans, and their families. It was also accredited by the United Nations and the SADCC for people who were going to be referred to the hospital by them because they happen to be closer to our borders. So that's the hospital. I mean, it's treated, presidents of other countries. And but today, floor 1 lies in ruin. Let me tell you what is on floor 1. That is no more there, leading to the state, to the department, to SAMS, to One Military outsourcing services. Floor 1 had 12 theaters, ICU, casualty that catered for emergency and trauma unit, laboratory, pharmacy, though part of it was also on floor 2, radiology, and the other ancillary services. So all of that was taken out when this project was started. And we've been told that that has actually led to some of specialists leaving the hospital because the things that they were appointed or work that they were appointed to perform is no longer being offered by the hospital. It's offered elsewhere because we're now outsourcing services to other, hospitals. So that has led to experienced, skilled doctors leaving our hospital. Has literally become a white elephant. In fact, I was listening to the presentation. I couldn't believe that I'm listening to a project on which close to R1 billion was spent, but we still have nothing to show of the money that was spent on the project. What we hear are the escalations, overpayments. We also hear of scope creeps and so on. The question was asked, which would expect the department to answer. We were told that as part of driving a project, Department of Public Works creates what is known as a steering committee, on which the client department sits and it participates in the development of the scope of the project, in the execution of the project. They also participate in the discussion with other external agencies as well, or various contractors as part of the steering committee. Now, as part of exercising oversight over the project, over the development of the project. Now, we want to know, where was the Department of Defense at that time when all of this was happening in the department? We should really reject the statement that says that when in 2011, the project was approximately 5%, only about 5% of work was still outstanding at the time. Can't be true. When I've just mentioned that the institution is dysfunctional because core services of the institution cannot be offered from the institution. We also reject that even in December, when Public Works was saying approximately 75% of the ramp scope of work had been completed. How on earth you claim to have completed, even reached 70%, when the nerve of the institution is destroyed? It's hollow. So that's a thing that if we say this, it's a disappointing picture we've received tonight. We mean exactly that. I'm saying this in echoing what the other colleagues have just said. And I don't know who I must start with to deal with the answers. Maybe let me ask the Abacus team to deal with the technical questions, and then leave the other questions to the Minister and the SecDef. And over to you, Mr. De Beer.
Thank you, Chair. I do not believe that are actually real new aspects for us to address, except to say three things. One, it is correct that there were steering committees in place. We found them to be ineffective. Two, it is also correct, like certain people alluded to in their questions, that they were overseers of people like Dupree and others, and that there sits a certain amount of accountability on that level. But on that point, I would like to indicate that the 3 senior officers that were part of the decision on the expansion project knew what the informal decision was and how it was going to be executed. And it was too late for them to actually deal with that by the time they realized in the short 15 months time for the expansion project how the results would be. Last point I would like to make is that I really believe that the empowerment of the formations unit, works formation, is an important aspect to deal with aspects like this. Clearly, they cannot hold all the capability technology-wise and or people-wise, but they need to be empowered to do what is needed in a defense force to look after the equipment, installations, and construction. Those were the only aspects that I thought I should comment on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. De Beer. Just one question, which is it was not posed, but it's not clear in the presentation. In the period between 2011 and 2014 or 2016, it's not clear how much was spent on the project. We gave us information of how much was spent in the first phase of the ramp and the second phase of the ramp, that's a ramp expansion. I think roughly 431 million. But during the refurbishment period, I'm not too sure if I can see the figures clearly from what you have actually presented. And do you want to say something on that? And secondly, who is this senior DOD official that is mentioned all over in the report? It's not clear. I was trying to link what you refer as a senior official in the redacted report and the presentation you have just given us now.
The senior person is General Fontaine, who was in SAMS at the time and the ultimate project manager and decision maker driving the whole expansion, but more specifically the refurbishment project until he left. So regarding you're correct, we do not have the figures in, but if you look at since 2011, in other words, after they closed the expansion project March 2011, the allocated money for Tektura and those people working with them was 35 million. That have all been spent and that budget has been depleted. On the advice work as to what we now need to do with one military hospital. I did tell you about the technology, the health technology company that was appointed to advise the program going forward. They were allocated a budget of 29 million. And by the time we wrote our report, that fully 29 million has been consumed. So as we saw the project by the end of 2020, when we wrote our report, there was no further capability budget-wise for both Tektura and the health tech company. LDM was the company. So that if you add the two together, 25, it's about 60 odd million that was utilized for this period. And again, I want to stress this was purely planning, design, helping the department to write a procurement document so that we can appoint the actual contractors that need to fix what still needs to be fixed across the hospital, but in particular then floor 1, 2, kitchen and entrance, pharmacy included. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, thanks. SecDef, do you want to respond to some of the questions before I move to the Minister?
Thank you very much, Chair. Chair, as I said, I'm here with the IG, with also General Minister, who's our Adjutant General, and then we have General Mbuli and General Lidwaba that comes from the log environment, and then also the works formation, and we have General Mapaha, who's our statistician, who's our Surgeon General at the moment, that has taken over from General Dabus. Chair, if I may just start by saying, when I was in DERCO and I was responsible for Africa, part of my responsibility was actually to liaise with defense on those heads of state that wanted to be treated in one meal. They didn't want to go anywhere in the world, but wanted to come to one meal. And when I came to defense in August 2020, I was really much looking forward to go and see one meal. And without much being said to me, I could conclude that one meal was the shadow of what it was. And I think that if you look at the report, it talks about the project having gone wrong, starting from the mandate, because this project, Chairperson, even if it struggled over a period of 20 years, even if we say we will look 15 years of that 20 years, at the point that the DPW came on board, they had never done a ramp on a military hospital. This was the first time that they were going to go there. And hence, in the report, even it says that everything went wrong, because what was the expectation of our colleagues from SAM to get a Rolls Royce of a military hospital with complies with all the health regulations and policies, and that is fully functional and that can still keep its glory, was what we expected as DOD from the SAM's perspective. Whereas from the DPW, they were treating it like they would treat any other ramp. And it was the first time that they were dealing with this. If you read the report, I managed to read the 42 pages of the executive summary. Everything that could go wrong went wrong. Whether it is from the companies that were contracted to what the role of the DOD was and the role of the DPW was, it told a story, because even though there were project managers that were contracted by DPW to run with these projects, quantity surveyors, even there were mistakes on bills of quantities that would be made, and that's how significant the problem was. So, and the project management was there, but there was nobody who was managing anything. Anybody who could back instructions, they did so. So, and what we are dealing with is the result of that. And unfortunately, Chairperson, some of us, we find this at the tail end, and we could just pick up the pieces and try to make the best in what could be done on a situation like this. And I think even within the department, some of the people that the project was started when they were there, they've moved on from those areas and moved on and moved to do other things. At least we have General Lidwaba, who comes from works formation, and I think you'll be able to talk to some of the issues that were raised in now. Chairperson, there were clear recommendations that were made by the report, and I think some of them have been spoken to. Part of those recommendations were saying that even though the ramp was headed over at some point to defense, it was then run by our colleagues from the works formation. And one of the things we have said to the committee here was that when we were working on the 7th floor, part of that was our own people to understudy the professional team that was doing the work on the 7th floor. And that was in acknowledgement that we didn't have all the required capabilities to be and capacity to run the project, but it is something that is being worked on. I know that General Ludwaba has worked out a program that is going to unfold in how we are going to build our own skills. It also said on the part of defense, there wasn't any leadership when it came to our SEMs. So you see that even the people who were supposed to hold everybody accountable didn't hold those people accountable. The redesign of the floor, first floor, was given to a lab assistant, somebody who will be in the lab and not actually redesigning the floor. And hence the reason why, even when the equipment were bought, they couldn't fit where they were supposed to fit, because everything, it was, in Afrikaans, they will say makompas, you know, you fit as you go along. And that's why everything went wrong. And that's why even the report says that some of the things were bought, they remained in their boxes until they became obsolete. In actual fact, we did not only lose the 1 billion, we lost more than that, because even what could have been done within the hospital had to be outsourced. So we can't also discard the amounts that have been incurred when it comes to outsourcing. And I will, at the appropriate time, hand over to the colleagues to deal with these issues. Where we are sitting right now, we are not able, we don't have the required funding to proceed with a project. You would recall, Chairperson, even at the point when we did the 7th floor, it was what we wanted to leave behind as a legacy project on the money that was given to the department in relation to dealing with the issues of the coronavirus. So that is what was shown there. And also that project shows that if you have the right management in place, proper oversight, then you will, it is not a task that is impossible, but that is what we find ourselves. Then, as we said, the investigation was initiated in 2019, and then only in 2020 the report came out, and it was shared with the current chief of the Defense Force. And I would imagine, Chairperson, that when the investigation was initiated, it means there was a concern within the department. And for the fact that we said that the magnitude of the fraud, the corruption, and how everything went wrong, that's why in my opening remarks, I mentioned the position we have taken as a department, that we will put everything to bear, and that we are working closely with our colleagues from the Department of Public Works on making sure that we move forward on that. There were also, Chairperson, the recommendations that were made in specific to certain individuals and a company. And from our colleagues in the military police and the IG environment, and the IG was the one that got the company to assist us with this investigation, is that has been forwarded to the Hawks, and the case number in that regard is available. I do agree that as we move forward, we need to fix what went wrong, and then also make sure that the mistakes that were repeated in the past will not be allowed to happen again. Chairperson, let me say that there are procurement processes in the department, in as much as there are procurement processes in the Department of Public Works and Infrastructure. However, if we get a report, it says there was an off-the-record meeting, there was a gentleman's agreement, there was a thumbs-up figure that we were going to put out there. It meant that even if the procurement policies were in place, they were intent on not following them. So it isn't that the fact that things went wrong, it was the lack of the policies. It wasn't. What was lacking was the people to be there. And there was a question actually that was asked by Honorable Muta to say, where was the end user? Now, even the people that we see here are very senior people who were there at the time within the SAMS environment. So they were the end users. But as I say, whether it was those from the DPW and then also the companies, that's why you see that with the companies, even the overruns of what they were paid, what they quote and what they eventually paid were something that were way above what was then required.
Sure.
I did mention, Chairperson, that from our side, we are in contact with all those people and we have done quite a bit of work. I must say that even at the time when we had the previous chief of the Defense Force, we had written on the matter to say that action needed to be taken, and we have written again with the new chief of the Defense Force to say that we needed to move on that. And that work, we did it together with the Office of the Adjutant General to make sure that we move on these issues. But if you look at the amounts that are involved, the question is, how do we even recover some of those? Because in the report, it even becomes very specific as to what individuals should be accountable for what. And Chairperson, I heard various members, honorable members, mentioning that we need to proceed with a criminal process on these matters, and probably justifiably so, if you then look at the amounts that are involved. And in Zulu, kutiwa icala liboli. So where we can salvage, I think we'll be able to salvage. And then, Chair, as I leave off the floor, I would hand over to the Adjutant General to CLOC as well as our IG that has been our major link with the Abacus Crime Advisory Company, as well as also dealing with the Hawks on this matter. And then we also have CLOC, under which the Works Formation Resource Chairperson. So if you may allow me that I invite the Adjutant General maybe to actually lead the pack on this matter.
Thank you very much. General Mnisi, I think the hospital lost the capability when the specialist left the institution. Lost its accreditation as a level 4 hospital, and we are outsourcing medical services at extremely expensive cost. Now, I think the General Ministry would tell us where to from here. Maybe you may have some idea, at least from your side, and the IG as well would also tell us where to from here, maybe from their side, because you are responsible for different roles within the entity. After that, it will be the chief logs who comment before we go to the minister.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good evening, Chair, honorable members, Minister of Defense and Military Veterans, our Deputy Minister, SecDef, SG, CLOC, and my colleagues. Very good evening. I'm Major General Mnisi, the Adjutant General of the South African National Defense Force. Chair, sir, without repeating what SecDef has said, I'll speak in two capacities. One capacity in the official capacity as an Adjutant General of the South African National Defense Force. Number two, as a South African, as a taxpayer myself. once is issue of, after we have received the report, the division, meaning legal service division, duly advised the principal. Just before I carry on, there is this thing in international law we call command responsibility. That simply means if a subordinate has committed an offense without the commander knowing, the commander is absolved from that. But when the commander knows, or he ought to have known, and he fails to take decision, then that responsibility now also moves to the commander's side. The commander must be held responsible and accountable for the omission or the commission of the crime by the subordinate. This principle is very important principle in international law. And if we borrow that to our domestic law or to our daily lives, you'll find that where criminality has taken place and I didn't know, there's no problem about that. But when criminality takes place and it has been brought to my attention and I act, there's nothing wrong. But if I fail to act, then as a commander myself, I'll be charged, accordingly. That is the first thing that I want to say, Chair. After we have received the report, we advised painstakingly, and we collaborated with the MP and military police, Provost Marshal General, and the matter as recommended by in the report. Then we submitted the report to the Hawks, and we have a case number FSEC that has said, that. And again, I say painstakingly because the process was slow. The process was slow. Those who had to have acted after the report was committed, the process was very slow and Chair and Minister of Defense. Then on the disciplinary action and then disciplinary action in the sense as ours in the military or those who wear the uniform, the disciplinary action is criminal action. And the fact that now there are civilians and there are those who are soldiers and have left the system, it means now this matter must be prosecuted where? In a civilian court. Hawks will investigate and refer the matter to the NPA. However, our worry is that the NPA's hands are full. There are a lot of serious and other prominent investigation in criminal prosecutions that are in their hands. Then these matters like this may be one of those that fall between the cracks. But now, because the matter happened in the Sergeant General's environment, the Sergeant General should and will advise that over and above the Hawk staff, the docket must make an A1 statement. That office must become a complainant, because now we forwarded the report as advised by the drafters of the report, but there's no complainant as so far. Therefore, we will advise the Sergeant General to be a complainant in this matter and go forward. That's number one. Number two, how to recover this money. Yes, we're not going to recover every single cent, Chair. However, I think also civil litigation, because in the report itself, it says the regular, irregular expenditure and the fruitless and wasteful expenditure was that. And there is a constitutional court decision, I think 2 to 3 years ago, whereby the department itself can apply, meaning now the Department of Public Works will apply and set those contracts aside, and we move on to recover the money that was mixed there. So it means that there should be two processes: the criminal side of it and the civil litigation side of it. And these processes can run concurrently, Chair. Then now, as a South African and also as a member of the Defense Force, not as an Adjutant General, it is very painful to see 1 mil the way it is now. Losing accreditation as one of the most advanced hospitals in the sub-Saharan Africa, we have lost accreditation. from United Nations. They were used to send people this side. Now, if we don't have money, as the SecDef has alluded to, that DOT has no funds to continue with the project, then does that mean the 1 mil is doomed? But again, if the country puts another 7 billion, even if it's 20 cents at 1 mil, without us having taken action, we have failed, the people of South Africa as a Department of Defense, Mr. Chair. And we will support Chief of the South African National Defense Force, the SecDef, and the Minister of Defense in these things, because the military police and our division are supposed to. We are not in a command channel when it comes to these things, but commanders, when these things they are exposed to them, they should take action there and there, take the matters to court and assist us to assist them. We don't initiate, we don't complain. They must complain so that this matter should be dealt with. But we take liberty to say we have referred the matter to the police as advised by the report itself. I submit, Chair.
That is reassuring, General Nisi. Thank you very much. IG.
Thank you, Chairperson. Am I audible?
Yes, you are, sir.
Let me greet the Minister of Defense, the Deputy, Chairperson yourself, and members of the committee. Chairperson, I think that the SecDef has said a mouthful, as well as the Adjutant General. For me, I do not have much to say, except to thank Abacus for the report and the work that they have done when we commissioned them in 2019. I submit, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, IG. All right. General Chief Locke, do you have any question to deal with on the questions that were asked by the colleagues? General Mboli, Chief Locke.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Let me also greet the Honorable Minister, the Deputy Minister, and the members of the committee.
Sorry, the reason we thought you also need to have a say, there are issues of procurement that were raised, and there are questions that relates to issues of procurement as well.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Let me start by saying on the way forward on the 1 mil. We were awaiting for the report, because knowing that the Tectura, which was part of the contract, is in the report, and we cannot proceed until the report has been finalized. As we see this thing now, the matter has been taken to the NPA or Hawks. From that, then it gives us a leeway when a criminal case has been opened against those individuals or companies where this thing involved. For us, because we couldn't continue moving forward with the issue of 1 mil, was avoiding litigation from the company. Now, because of there is a report, now it gives us the freeway to then proceed with the rest of the floors that needs to be refurbished at at 1 mil 3 hospital. Over the issue of procurement, as Mr. De Beers mentioned on his presentation that for this thing, there's nothing that can this thing can be done when people outside the process, they have their own secret meetings and decide. On the specifications that gets forwarded to the procurement center, the specialist from that environment, the health technologist, is the one who writes the specs for procurement. Then the procurement center moves from those premises of the specs that have been this thing been given. The procurement center bought the equipment as requested, but the architectures of what needs to be, how the building's supposed to this thing to look like, and all that. But from the environment of the procurement this thing members, they've done whatever that was requested of them to this thing to do. Yes, there was a delay as it's been presented with the health technologies. The health technologies, when they were brought in, it was years after the project was already derailed for them to come and assist on what technology is required on these floors. On those grounds, Honorable, this thing shared, we truly admit ourselves from the law this thing environment, specifically in the environment of this thing of defense works, because there were people who were directly dealing with Tektura on this matter. At one point in time, at our finance committee meeting, with the invoices that were brought to us, we asked quite a lot of questions. And at one point, the committee suspended Tektura for because we needed answers as a committee, because we were seeing the issue of 1 mil unending in front of our that was our intervention as the log division, calling the project officer responsible who was bringing the invoices on front of our committee. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, colleagues. I think we have received replies. Colleagues, have your questions been answered before I go back to the minister for her closing remark on the matter? Okay, it doesn't look like there's any. Oh, okay, Mr. Ryder.
Two hands.
Yeah, two hands. Mr. Ryder.
Thank you very much, Chair. Chair, a very brief comment that if I may make it. I think General Mnisi's comments about the budget going forward are very important. And I think as a committee, it's not within our power, but certainly I think that we should make a recommendation as a committee to the Portfolio Committee on Defense, that when it comes time for the BRRRs and the reviews, that these matters get taken into account and these matters get discussed in depth, because it can't be that we find ourselves in a position again this year that we just rubber stamp through the National Assembly and the National Council of Provinces the budget for the Defense Department when it's not going to achieve what is needed on the ground. That budget needs to be reworked from the ground. We've got a new minister. We've got an opportunity to rethink the whole thing. I think your BRRR in the Standing Committee on Defense is going to be one of the most important engagements that has happened in the last 27 years, 28 years now of democracy with parliaments determining things. This is a massively important issue, and it's my I'm imploring the members that sit on that on that standing committee to have a seriously in-depth discussion around your budget allocation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rader. Mr. Murray.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you for the responses and submissions. Obviously, it is. I can understand that both the SecDef and the Inspector General is very cautious in terms of how they respond because of the nature of this animal that we've got in front of us. Because there's a lot of consequences and consequent management to do. Obviously, we sit with this hospital that was once the pride of Africa. We will see next week what happens at the budget. But given the realities that we know and what we have also seen yesterday in terms of the primary objectives of the SANDF and the big needs that we've got there, that both the SecDef and the Minister will have to come back to both the Portfolio Committee and this Joint Standing Committee on how are we going to tackle this thing going forward? What are our options? If money is not available, what must we do with this hospital if we haven't got the money? Because if nothing has been done for another 10 years, there will be nothing left. And everything that has been done on the 7th floor will be a total waste. So both the Minister and the SecDef must prioritize feedback and a proper response and a brief to us, both in the Joint Standing Committee and the Portfolio Committee. Because as Honourable Ryder has said, we are dealing now with a budget. And I know that yesterday you and I said afterwards that come the budget process, we must get some briefs before we conclude on the budget, because otherwise we are going to waste more money, and we cannot throw good money after bad objectives and bad purposes and bad projects. This is currently a bad project, and given the nature of even the technology like radiology equipment, it's probably going to cost us more and more millions of rands, because those must all be imported from abroad. And so we even haven't even touched on that. So maybe it's a multi-discipline or a multi-department problem that we have to tackle with, and maybe it is time that we talk to either the National Department of Health or the Provincial Department of Health and see what kind of collaboration can take place. How can we utilize this facility and to the good of South African people, soldiers, and obviously military veterans going forward? It is just a too encompassing problem that we've got just to leave that as kind of a dying horse. So my request would be that we deal with this properly and responsibly. Because I cannot see how this project can go forward with the kind of money that they require, that the kind of litigation processes that will follow, that is all time consuming. So we will probably see in the next 2 to 3 years no progress at one military hospital, given that there's going to be a civil litigations and criminal cases going on. So that's my request. Hopefully the Minister will respond to that, and also the SecDef. Thank you very much, Chair.
Okay. No. Thank you very much, colleagues. I think we should try to find a way forward. Obviously, it was not my expectation that we'll conclude on this issue. Receiving a briefing from the Minister, we thank her for the briefing, and even more so for allowing the team that conducted the forensic audit to come and present the report itself. We really appreciate that. This is an eye-opener, and Now, I think it says to me, we must now start to look at what is happening in other hospitals. There's 2 military hospitals and 3 military hospitals. So not that we have not been looking at those, but we need to pay a special attention to these 2 military hospitals, and one in Cape Town and the other in Bloemfontein. 2 on this one, I'm sure it would not be asking too much of the department to give us feedback on what they are doing about trying to bring to book the officials who are implicated within the department. And so we should work out an arrangement where they come to brief us at least quarterly on what they are doing about it. And the link tied to that, it's getting information from the Department of Public Works, because so they were here and the minister assured us that she had started applying a consequence management. We must also get a report, a briefing, update on how what they are doing on that front, and including what the General Minister said, applying to the court to set aside the contracts and recover the monies that were lost to the state. I'm raising this point because in one meeting, the chief of works formation said the reason they couldn't move at the time was that they were still held to the contracts. So those contractors were still waiving their contracts at them. And then we did not know the shenanigans. We did not know the fact that those contracts were intended in the manner that has been explained now. That would then pave the way for the chief, the chief of works formation, to take over and then appoint new contractors to deal with this. But there again, we need also to look at the budget, whether there will be money to try and bring this institution back to its glory. I don't know if we'll have the money. 1.4 billion rand was bandied about, but I'm not too sure if that is the amount of money we need. But it's a matter that we need to look at. It's critical because already we've spent over R1 billion outsourcing. I think billion rand, it was in the figures in the presentation, outsourcing services to private, outsourcing our patients to private service, service providers. So we need to look at that. I don't think it's time to wash off our hands on the hospital. The hospital we need, it provides a service to our soldiers who contributed with their time, with their energy, with their life, and in defense of the country. And their families were being treated in that hospital. Our veterans are also expecting to be treated, receiving treatment from the hospital. So we can't wash off our hands of it, and but we need to see how we move on that one. So, and then the minister will then come in and And in coming in, the minister, there was a officer commanding at the time. I don't understand what was his role or her role when all of these things happened under his or her watch. I don't know who it was at the time, and maybe the minister would shed light on that one. And what ought to have been his or her responsibility when the whole institution collapsed on him or her. Minister, over to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chairperson. Yes, we're not going to wash our hands of this, the 1 mil. It is not completely closed. Your veterans and your active soldiers still go for treatment. Certain sections and certain floors are still not operational, but your radiology is up and running. I do know that the doctors have walked me around, and what we really need to get a move on is to ensure that they do have functional spaces and the restoration of theaters. So we don't intend to walk away from 1 mil. It has to be restored to what it was. We have also kept our eye on 2 mil. It is still functional. It does require some repairing and maintenance work. The hospital I can at this stage not comment on is 3 mil because I have not visited it. So I would say that responding to Honorable Ryder's first question was this report tabled by Abacus does not tell us anything about what is going to happen. That was not the intention of the investigation. So when we received the report, we, Team DOD, was supposed to sit down and then say, this is the report, even before we ran to the Hawks. Look at those things. Who was responsible at the point of service? The question you are asking, Chairperson. What did they do? When the doors were locked, what did the head of SAMS say? Was a report fielded? What was the response? When the budgets were overridden, what did the main budget holder say? SecDef was not there, but what did the predecessor say? He was keeping an eye on the cents and the rands and the cents. So we need to be going through it stage by stage, finding out who knew what and who closed their eyes when things were happening. Because it can't be that an amount that big just goes. And we say, well, we might recover, we might not recover. I do know that one of the mistakes we do as the executives, the politicians, and let me tell you, Chairperson, the accounting officers, if you are not fast, the first thing they tell you is that you have no administrative role if you are a politician and a minister. Except that their delegations, both administrative and financial, must be in writing from a politician. And therefore, that is why we take responsibility for the finances and administrative functions when they collapse. So we can't only be there to decorate when things go nice and clap hands. And when things go wrong, we take the liabilities. I want to make an example. When I first went to, my first week as Premier of the Northwest was to be met by a huge but empty biannual show in Mafikeng. The heads of departments had come together and they had spent more than 6 million to do that. It was a poor organized, but the money is the hundreds, the millions had been spent. And when I asked, the then DG said to me, ma'am, it has nothing to do with you. This is my role as, and I said, it is not your money. It comes from the fiscus. It is the people's money. I want to know. And that is why at that point I learned to interfere with the delegations to heads of departments. Because if you don't do that, it means an accounting officer can spend whatever money and you, the politician's head, can go and roll and you can be reduced to nothing because you are convinced by the administration that in fact you are just a figurehead. It's not going to happen on my gut. We are going to be re-looking at the delegations. And that is why, Chairperson, it is important for me to come back and say, when the Chief of the National Defense Force designate, because that's just how we need to start. When they designate people for promotion, we must look what they are designating. Is this person able to keep an eye on finances? Does this person's training actually enable this person to run a base, to run an arm of service? Because if that is not the case, that means people who are looking at getting promotion should start arming themselves there. Because it can't be that you go to a base and the monies are being squandered. And this OC says, but I know nothing because that is not my forte. Mena, my skill is in flying the aeroplane and giving instructions to soldiers. No. When you take responsibility, we must make sure that we have trained you to be accountable. And that is where I think DevSec and Chief of the National Defense Force, we must come back in and discuss. A professional soldier is a soldier not only wearing shining boots, but the one who knows every aspect of their responsibility. So I want to say to Ndate Tseko, we will follow up, Ndate Mafanya, we will follow up all from the instance where those things, the delegations were changed, from the point where certain companies were pulled out and others were replacing others, we would want to know, because we're not just going back to, we're learning into the future for what needs to be avoided. We would want to have a session where, as defense, we can say, these are the lessons learned, and this is never going to happen again. We cannot have somebody who sits there and says to the medical practitioners, give me your shopping list and I can draw the plans. Chairperson, I want to tell you that there was a hospital before my time as Premier of the Northwest that can tell exactly the same story, where equipment was ordered from China, which sat there in storage, X-rays expensively bought, which were completely unsuitable to be used within their perimeters. This cannot continue to be repeated in South Africa if we are serious about it. And so I want to assure the committee that matters might go there, but internally we've got to go through this painful thing of who, where, why did you close your ears and your eyes? Why did you not act? If you did not understand, why did you not ask for somebody to enlighten you so that you take appropriate action? So we need to be looking at that. Ndate Maria, I don't think the budget that kicks in next month will help us much. Remember that that process started last year in July. By October, it was almost just going through the phases. The figures were being worked on and whatever. What we need to do is to now look at the coming budget and say, to what extent do we actually put a focus on ensuring that the whole of the medical service gets attention in that forthcoming budget. But we must also ask you, Chairperson, to give us space into the future, DevSec, to come in and say to you, since that debacle, this is what has been happening in 1 mil. This is the progress that has been made. This is where we want to go. This is the financial exposure that will come in. Because I did not walk into a department where people have just been watching 1 mil. They have been doing something. So I think DevSec, it is only right that we will ask for space and to come and brief the committee and say, this is where we are still lacking, but actually this is where we want to go. And this is what we think we will achieve within this space of time. I want to say that, yes, we need to interfere with delegations right down to the basis. I want to know what the preparations are for when people get responsibilities, whether they are in uniform or whether they are in the civilian side. I want to know who the CFO was at that time, why they were not keeping an eye on this. So for me, it's not just you are going to look at these people named here. We need to go back because we need to say to those who are currently in posts, don't sit there and think that you are going to be protected if you even hear a rumor and you don't follow it. If you are not verifying the finances that come before you. If the request for payments are just coming and we are just signing off without verifying and without making sure that we know what we are talking about. So if we do that, I think we will begin to set a cycle that will start reviving not only our financial responsibilities, but we will also show Treasury and the country that we are responsible with the monies that are entrusted to us. We will regain the confidence of the professionals. And yes, Chairperson, we have still, maybe a number of those professionals have left. But I think SAMS has produced a lot of young medical expertise, which is quite impressive for this country. And we must not lose sight that we may have lost some skills, but we have also built some skills. And what is impressive is that this skill does not come from one race, it is across the board. So we've gone down, but we've also begun to really own the Defense Force as South Africa. So I want to say that the investigations cannot stop. We must not say that people have gone. I come from the old school, DevSec, that says, when I leave the service and something smelly follows me up, I can still be called to account. I can still be judged, even militarily. I can still be stripped of the honors I was given. So, and if we don't do that, we are not curing the defense, because those officers in uniform, ranked, under whose gut that this thing has happened, if they are found guilty, they must be stripped. They must be stripped. Because if we do not do that, we will have a revolving door. We will always have people taking chances, getting away with stuff. We must put our foot down. We've got to stem this tide. The defense has to become professional. Professional also means accountable, respectable, trustworthy, efficient, and respecting that which you are supposed to protect. We can't be a defense force that is supposed to be protecting the integrity and the sovereignty of South Africa if we ourselves are the vandalizers. So I want to assure the committee that we will be doing something about this matter. We will also be doing something about preparing a soldier to march into higher commissions, prepared to command on all rounds, so that we clear this thing. We must begin to be slow in promotions. and stronger on preparing people to really perform when they are promoted. Whether they are black or white, I really don't give a damn. We will produce professional soldiers. We will question promotions when they are made, where we can. If they are outside our scope, well and good, we will still find them if they can perform, because we will do this. That means also, Chairperson, that we will crack the whip on the military judges. We will look at the military police, whether they are doing the things that they should be doing. So it is not just the finances that we worry about, it is the reputation of the military in total. I know there were a number of questions, but I think that if we relook at the delegations, if we start looking at what we can put in place to make sure that Busilok have little bells ringing that warn them about things, that it is not just Silok, that the DevSec has a very big alarm clock that says to her things are going wrong in finance. Procurement is not going accordingly. These finances are not going to be given the green light to go. Then we will begin to do what needs to be done. Meg Bierker said to us, the procurement policy, yes, we're going to relook at it. And yes, I think we want to relook at the whole structure of SEMS. It is not just people trained as professionals, but as I say, when you go through the ranks, we must be sure that you can actually command people, and command because you are trained, not command because we are expecting you to take things on the hoof. Untate Shelembe was saying, are people still in? Some of them seem to be out in Tate Shelembe, but we will follow those who are out. We have absolutely no interest of allowing anybody, because you see, when a general dies, we still go to the funeral and salute. If a general has not performed accordingly, why should they die and why should we go there and salute? So this is how low I will get to recover the dignity of the defense. Chair, as I said, I would plead that we be given the space to come and rebrief on what is happening in 1 mil. I would also repeat my invitation to both the Portfolio Committee and the Joint Standing Committee for when we are ready to go on a little small bus parade to relook at where we want to see the South African National Defence Force into the future. What has gone wrong? How can we correct it so that we take all of us on board and we say, this is where we want to go in re-imaging. In Parliament, we insisted that Public Works will not run our contracts alone. Unfortunately, I left before we could start institutionalizing that, because there was a resistance and even a reluctance from Parliament to be involved. But every contract that we will get into with Public Works, we will have a warm body in defense responsible also for that contract, so that when it hits the fan, we know who to hit within the family of defense. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Minister. Well said. All right, so we will invite you to come back. Like I said, we'll decide, but I was proposing quarterly, just to brief us about how you applying consequence management on all those that are implicated in the report, plus those that are implicated by omission or commissioned because they fall in the supply chain, which was not a focus of the presentation. I think that environment needs to be investigated. The colleagues from the AG are in the meeting. Mr. Lawrence Van Vieren and Ms. Mbali Zodetse. I'm sure they've been listening to the discussion, and very soon we'll ask them to process the information for the committee and present it in a manner that will assist us in doing follow-ups on to follow through on the report, because we're not going to leave any stone unturned. So we'll end this at that for now, and thank Abuskus team, Mr. De Beer and his team for the presentation today. It has certainly opened us our eyes not only on this but on other similarly situated institution within the department. Let me thank you and then say you may be excused. Colleagues, then the next item.
We will leave. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gabriel. All right, colleagues, the next item, the department is not going to be long on it. It's a briefing on the on the fire that took place at the Waterkloof Airforce Base. That will be the last item, and then we'll shelve the other items to the next meeting. Secdef, over to you, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Chair. We have Brigadier General Mukwena, who is the OC at the Waterkloof. He is the one who is going to present on the item. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, General Mukwena. Welcome. The platform is yours.
Thank you. Good evening, Chairperson and the members of the committee, Minister of Defense, Deputy Minister, Secretary of Defense, military commanders present in the meeting, General Temgosi Mukwena, the officer commanding Air Force Base Waterkloof. Sir, I will be presenting the findings of the preliminary investigation into the bulk fuel installation at Air Force Base Waterkloof. I will cover just what happened at Waterkloof and the base reactions, causes, interim measures that we've put in place to support operations, the plans for the way forward and prevention of the reoccurrence of the same incident. So the overview of the incident, it was on the 23rd of January 2022 when a fire broke out at the bulk fuel installations. It was around about 1836 till 1900. Oh, thank you. The base reactions, the firefighters, the Air Force firefighters, which are based at Waterkloof, the incident was reported to them. They responded in less than 5 minutes to the fire scene, and they managed to extinguish the fire in less than an hour. And their swift reactions prevented because those pumps are sitting on top of, they were sitting on 240,000 liters of fuel at that time. So they prevented the fuel from catching fire and explosion that could have damaged property within the base and the neighboring suburbs around us. And based on the above information, the SAF leadership has made the decision to emulate these members accordingly. The cause of the fire, it was a preliminary investigation indicates that the fire was an accident, a component failure, a pipe. The pipes, the system is a closed system which is constantly under pressure. in order to supply fuel within the base, as the system carries about 3 million liters of fuel. So one of the pipes sprung a leak and a vapor came out, and then it is suspected that one of the wiring from the motors caused a spark which ignited the fuel mist, and then the fire started. And why we've even classified it during the preliminary investigation as an accident, because we've got a video footage which also shows how the fire started, and there's video even for 24 hours before the fire started and up until the fire service arrived, that shows that nobody was at the site during that time. So there was no sabotage on the fuel systems. The interim measures, we've made storage available for about 1 million liters in order to support our operations, and also allow the base to support the heads of states that visit our country and land at Waterkloof. We'll be able to supply them with fuel, and we'll be able as well to support our own operations as the SANDF. And the plans moving forward, so the Board of Inquiry, I've convened a Board of Inquiry, which is the only teams of engineers. It's a team of engineers from 5 air servicing unit within Airforce Base Waterkloof to investigate the reason why the pipe actually failed. And a certificate of essential request has been generated to ensure the expedited process to repairs of the infrastructure, and as well the installation of fire suppression system, which will be automatic with sensors that if there's a fire, and then it deploys the fire suppression, either the liquid or CO2 into the system. And then the increased frequency of maintenance. On the issue of maintenance, I would like to assure the committee that the site was maintained, as it is a closed and under pressure system. It is shut down once in 5 years, where the pumps are taken apart and put on a test bench to make sure that they are still running correctly and the bearings are correct. And then as well, the tanks, they get serviced. November 2019, that whole system a new system was put in there. That was brand new pumps that are there, and the pipes as well were refurbished in November 2019, which means it just gave us another close to 3 years again to go before we shut down the system for complete overhaul. On monthly basis, we have OC's inspection, where the section heads go around and inspect the site, and then they come and report back. And on a daily basis, due to the fuel stats that they have, it has to be forwarded to the command post and to myself. The members that work at bulk fuel, they go and do inspection as well onto the site. But these are visual inspection. The full service is done every 5 years due to the system design, that it must be a closed system under pressure, that people should not be tampering with it. Yesterday I've sat down with the base management. We're drafting a plan. The engineers are drafting a plan that will be submitted to DBSS for that point, which says increased frequency of maintenance, to see what else can we do more to ensure that this does not happen. But the engineers will design it, and as well they will be guided by the recommendation of the Board of Inquiry that will be available in 2 weeks' time. There will be increased inspection. I've now changed the inspection from a month to a bi-weekly, the OC's inspection, and then the section heads and the coordinators will come and report on the conditions of the site. And then I will include the engineers to go and check, because it's a more technical area. And then we also recommend the installation of cameras that will be monitored by the fire section, as the fire section is manned 24/7 in the base. In their ops room, we'll put monitors that will monitor the fuel sites. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, General Mkwena. I'm relieved that no foul play was suspected, and that it was a technical fault, and that you were able to put the fire under control before it could cause extensive damage on the base. All right, colleagues, over to you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Can I proceed? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for the presentation, and I think it was very constructive. It was very proactive. It is, there's a lot of questions that we would have asked otherwise that you have dealt with. It is good that it has been determined that there is not something sinister going on. The only thing that I want to ask from you is, when those inspections are done, both in terms of visual inspections and more in-depth inspections, if there's a record of that, and if there's a register that that is completed, so that we know and you know what they have found and what they have seen probably. Also, because this is not long after 2019, so it's strange that there's basically a technical fault. Is that because of poor quality of parts, or what have you determined is the reason that there was a technical fault? Because I mean, this can be catastrophic. So this is a very important issue, and we must get just to the bottom of that. Then I also want to find out whether on Waterkloof Airforce Base, dolomite is a big problem, and whether those dolomite challenges have added to this, and whether you foresee that. Then, whilst I'm going to ask you about the cost and how we're going to fund that, at Waterkloof Airforce Base, it is one of those strategic installations where budget should not be a problem. So in other words, money should be available for that. But obviously from an accountable point of view, an accounting point of view, one must just ask how you're going to do that, whether money is available for that. Why is the money available at this stage? Whether is it because it was staggered away? How you spend the money on maintenance at Air Force Base Waterkloof, and the same with the other Air Force bases? Or is it special appropriated money or special allocated money at this stage to do that? Because what you have told us is necessary. And I think from my side, we must support it all the way. Although it sounds like, it's gonna be a couple of thousand, probably hundreds of thousands of rand that you are talking about if you want to do it properly for our prime Air Force Base in South Africa. Thank you very much. But well done on the determination. And also, I must tell you, I have right from the beginning, everybody that has asked me all those doomsday prophets, I have said there's no indication whatsoever that there was foul play. Oh, the other thing that I just want to ask you, I've heard that at one stage, Tshwane municipality was basically neglecting the area outside of Air Force Base Waterkloof in terms of informal housing that they allow there and things like that. Is that a problem? Have you liaised with Tshwane? How can we as a portfolio committee maybe assist you as well if there are challenges like that? I think we must help you wherever we can, because Air Force Base Waterkloof must be our pride as well. Thank you.
Okay. Thabo Motle, and then Mr. Raider. Honorable Thabo Motle, and then Honorable Raider.
All right. Thanks, Chair. not all is lost. At least Honorable Mare is willing to assist with Tswan.
No problem.
Yeah, Chair. Firstly, let's applaud the team that managed to effectively and efficiently distinguish the fire and keep it under control. One could imagine the damage that they have prevented. So they really deserve an applaud. We should, as a portfolio committee, appreciate the work that they have done to keep that fire under control. But maybe in addition to what Honorable Murray has asked, is the question of maintenance and serviceability of tanks, the storage tanks. Is that not a challenge on your side? Are you able to replace parts timeously according to their lifespan, so forth and so forth, or are you also experiencing a challenge as a result of budget constraint? Because if that is the case, I think the department need to prioritize maintenance in that regard, so that such unforeseen, unfortunate event need to be prevented at all costs, because failure to do so, it might cause a lot of damage and a lot of escalation of cost to repair those kind of damages. So I just want to get from you if you are not having that challenge in terms of maintenance and replacements of parts that need to be replaced on the pipeline or on the system, the whole system as a whole. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Media.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, thank you very much. And again, well done for limiting the damage. I think a job. But just in terms of the equipment itself, I'd like to know what is the age of that equipment, the tanks and the pumps specifically, and what their expected lifespan is. Because specifically, you can do as much maintenance and inspection as you like, but if you're fixing the problems with a band-aid that are supposed to be replaced by getting a new system entirely, it is an issue. And again, it comes down back to budget priorities and what we're wanting to do with the money that is given to us in the budget next week. Whether it's going to be spent again on an unfunded organigram, or if we need to start looking at replacing equipment and maintaining equipment. That's part one. Part two, Honourable Murray, it's always tough talking after him because he asked a big question about the informal settlements in the area, and I believe that it's not so much a formal informal settlement, or formal informal, not so much a structured informal settlement as we've seen them, but often it's people that are camping in the bush because they see it as a fairly safe location. And I think anyone that stays in Acacia Park will know of a similar setup that's gone up there, just on our borders, because people feel safe because there's police protection, or at Waterkloof there's obviously military protection. So the question is this really a problem? Have you seen it increasing, and is there a threat to your perimeter fence? And if the army can't stop land invasions, or the Air Force can't stop land invasions, then who on earth can? Is the big issue that I have. But surely perimeters need to be patrolled and people need to be kept away. But is it a problem? That's the bottom line. It was reported that this potentially was becoming an issue in the area. If we can just get some clarity from the Air Force Base. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, I think that was the last point. Mr. Rader is correct. Minister, please take note of this point. When we visited the base, I'm not too sure if it's this one, I think it's this one. There is an informal settlement that has developed around the base. And usually, a base, for the base to be protected, and it must have a zone that is not occupied by people. But that zone has been invaded, no longer a free zone. That radius. So it's a dangerous situation that is developing in that area. And it's not the only base that has been invaded right into the protected, what ought to be a free zone. We've seen it in other bases as well. In this one, we received a briefing that they've also interfered with the rail, such that now they no longer rail fuel into the base. It now has to be tankered into the base, because the people who have invaded these areas, for some reason, I don't know what they were looking for, interfered with the thing. Maybe it was deliberate because they wanted to sell the metal to the scrapyards. We don't know. It makes it urgent that we attend this issue of metal scrapyards, because they are a pain not only in people in their houses, but with government as well. Minister, over to you. But before Minister, let me just deal with the questions and then go back to the Minister. General, just the technical questions, so that I don't burden the Minister with the technical questions.
Thank you, Chairperson. On the issue of inspection records, we do have there's a directorate-based support systems. I'll combine this point with the issue of the budget, where I was asked if I've got problems with money to maintain. No, we don't have a problem to maintain the fuel system. It is budgeted for by DBSS, and then they actually keep on reminding us on the time when it's going to be due, because we have to pump fuel from one tank to another tank. So they come and service the whole system. So there is records. The base keeps records, and DBSS as well keeps records for that, for the servicing. And then the budget, as I said, it comes from DBSS. So far, I haven't had any problems where they say they do not have money to service any of these infrastructures. On the second question for reason for technical fault, the reason is not known yet. The Board of Inquiry will complete in 2 weeks with the engineers. Then they will put details to say what could have caused the failure of the pipe. So in 2 weeks' time, the Board of Inquiry will be sent to GOC Air Command with all the details, the engineering part of the failure. The dolomite problem, so far we've got a contractor in the base that is dealing with the dolomite problems, but I don't see it at bulk fuel. I cannot contribute that failure to the dolomite problem, but I cannot as well rule it out completely, say. because, like I said, the engineers will then tell us to say, what is it that could have caused the failure? The budget to fix the damage, currently, the base is not going to carry out the tasks, as my delegation in the base is limited to 100,000 rands. So this we have to change 7 pumps and rebuild some of the installation, which we will elevate this to DBSS, who then will see how they manage it, and if need be, then they will contact works formation if that's the way that they will go. But for us is to compile all the requirements, and then we'll give it to DBSS, the base support of the Air Force. The issue of Tshwane municipality not assisting with the squatter camps, we've been receiving quite since I've taken the base last year, a good working relationship with the city of Tshwane when it comes to squatters. And the squatter problem, the first time I inspected that area, I sent a group of our security cluster, the military police, the protection and the counterintelligence members to go and remove the people. And I've been informed that there's a court order that prevents us from moving the ones who are on the southwest of the base, close to SPCA there. There's a court order that prevents us from moving those people. But the ones who are more on towards the R21 on the east, we remove them every time. They seem to come back because the structures are not permanent structures that they put up there. They just put up tents, or they put up plastic or to cover themselves, just for people to sleep. Some of them dig up holes and just cover themselves with plastic. So even if you remove them in the afternoon, they are back. So what I've done, I've included that as part of patrol for the base. So they are not relaxed. Every time we're doing patrols on the inside, we're doing patrols on the outside. So to make sure that they don't interfere with the base wall, and then they don't interfere with the drains as well, because the storm drains are quite wide. A human being can fit there, but we've got roads that actually prevent people from entering there, and they are frequently monitored. The storage tank maintenance problems, we don't have a problem when it comes to maintaining like I've mentioned before, sir. DBSS is doing a great job when it comes to that, to maintaining that infrastructure, and they've got an SSO that is appointed to work on that on this equipment. And then on the age of the equipment, the pumps, like I said, they are quite new. They are 2 years old, all the pumps, and the fittings around the pumps. They are 2 years old, sir. And the tanks, because it's underground tanks, they are quite old, but they are well maintained. Like I said, there's a company that comes and scrubs them and calibrate them. So the maintenance of the tanks is quite at higher standard. The problems and threats of the squatters, yes, there is a threat of the squatters, especially because the squatters, like the chairperson has mentioned, that they stripped that station down there in Littleton that belongs to Metro Rail or PRASA. They where we used to gain our fuel. Then we also think that they might be looking to steal metal as well, as the base has got a lot of metal. So that is why we also increase the patrols, both on the inside and the outside. And what I've decided, we're gonna cut and keep the vegetation around the base very low, so that everybody can be seen from far. Because sometimes we get that thing of because the environmental officer wants the indigenous trees to grow, and then these people gain now shelter under the trees. I've decided that at a certain parameters next to the wall of the base, we will keep the vegetation very low so that a person can be seen from far, and patrol can pick up the people if they are moving towards the base. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much. You are reassuring. Please, we don't want to see the institution collapsing in your hands. Keep up with the good work. Minister, over to you. Your concluding remarks. Thanks. I think the minister is, oh, there she is.
Oh, Chairperson.
Yes. I was actually remarks, Minister. I think we've come to the end. He did well.
Yeah. Chairperson, yes, I think Ntate Mokoena did well. I also think that Ntate Mare was looking for the name Valmasdal, that base, Eco Valmasdal, the one where we lost a few of the trucks to the fire. And I do think that we do need to come back to just this last point of making sure that we not only to protect the Defence Force from theft and possible fires starting in these creeping informal settlements, but also to help immunize soldiers from being accused of being too fraternal with communities, because it can lead us to a lot of other problems. So we need to work out on a strategy that does not say we think we are better than the communities that we are supposed to be protecting, but that we do need to keep our distances. And perhaps it comes, what you suggest is, it is the infrastructure that we put to protect defense property that we must give attention to. I think that Ntate Mokoena has done very well. That perhaps unless DEFSEC sees any need, I am satisfied with the undertakings, and that of course as soon as that inquiry report is ready, that we will also finish the committee with it. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Minister. Colleagues, I think it's the right time to call it a quit. And but before that, let me thank the Minister, the DM who is in the meeting, the SecDef, and the team from the Defence Force for the interaction this evening. And the team from the also thank the team from the AG and everyone, including our team that supported us in making this meeting what it is. With that, I wish you a good night. The meeting stands adjourned.
Okay.
Thank you very much. See you next week. Thank you, Minister. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Chair.
Yeah.